Good evening. My name is David Marwell, and I am very honored and proud to be the president of the Leo Baeck Institute. I assumed my new role at nearly the same time that the COVID pandemic descended upon us and changed our world and our lives. I could not have imagined back in March that I would be greeting you this evening at my own desk in my own study near Washington, D.C., with my overgrown Corona coif and having nearly forgotten how to tie my tie. To be sure, the pandemic has exerted a significant impact on the way we conduct business, on the way we interact with loved ones and strangers, and yes, on the manner in which we hold our annual Leo Baeck Dinner. This year, in response to the pandemic, we have reimagined our major annual fundraising event, and it is with profound pleasure to welcome you to it this evening. At the risk of overusing what may be a tired metaphor, tonight we offer not a catered dinner, but rather a curated feast of food for thought. There will be no gustatory treats, but rather nourishment of a more lasting sort. We offer a balanced menu of seasoned and well-prepared thinkers and doers who, in an informal salon setting, will stimulate you more than even the most sumptuous meal ever could. And we will do this without you having to leave your home, worry about the weather, what to wear, or whether you will get home before the 11 o'clock news. I'm very proud of the staff at LBI and its leader, Billy Weitzer, for conceiving of this evening and executing it with their customary competence and good humor. I am grateful to Ronald Sobel, my predecessor, who demonstrated such confidence in me. He and Joni are watching from their home in Vermont. I imagine them sitting in front of a warm fire. Welcome and thank you, Ronald. I am grateful to the LBI Board, not only for welcoming me, for their continued support.
Thank you, David. And thanks to everyone for coming and supporting LBI at a time when there are many priorities in our lives. The health of our friends, colleagues, and loved ones, causes related to the pandemic, and of course, the highly contentious election. Fort has remained healthy, and everyone has been able to work productively from home. And we will do so until we can return to the Center for Jewish History sometime in 2021. In addition to our important collections work, which we will highlight later in the evening, we've been working on a project called Shared History that will take place throughout 2021. The following brief video will introduce the project, which highlights the history of Jews in Central Europe for nearly 2,000 years.
All too often, I think the history of Jews in Germany is distilled into the final and tragic chapter where an entire people and an entire culture and legacy was nearly destroyed. But it's important to know that Jews didn't arrive in Germany right before the Holocaust. They were there for more than 1,700 years.
Over the past 1,700 years, there has been a remarkable history of Jews in German-speaking lands. There are stories of migration, exclusion, inclusion, persecution, success, and resilience, all of which are valuable reminders of this important history and provide lessons for today about how a minority culture can survive and thrive while living side by side with a dominant culture. At LBI, we created the Shared History Project to illustrate the coexistence, cooperation, and tensions over the centuries. Weekly throughout 2021, the Shared History Project will reveal an object that tells a story and illuminates the lessons learned from 1,700 years of Jews in German-speaking lands. Some of the academic experts who we consulted with will describe their favorite objects, beginning with one from the year 321.
The Edict by Kaiser Constantine the Great, written in the year 321, and it's the earliest surviving written source on the existence of Jews in Central Northern Europe. The City Council expanded to include new members and thus also its sources of income, because to be part of the City Council, one had to pay. We can therefore assume that at the time of the edict, there was a Jewish community living in Cologne before this very significant date. It is a law that applies throughout the empire. So it is obvious that there were Jews in more or less every important city of the late Roman Empire.
And one of my favorite objects in this section is the Plochen Parochet, the covering of the Torah Ark from Prague. It is a wonderful example of gender boundaries, of inclusion of women in Jewish life and sacred spaces, but it also shows the shared aesthetic of the period. These are beautiful fabrics that were used by not just Jews, but by everybody in this period.
Moses Mendelssohn's eyeglasses, his spectacles, are a wonderful quintessential symbol of who Mendelssohn was. Mendelssohn was a major figure of the German Enlightenment, specifically the Berlin Enlightenment, but he was also a major figure of the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah. Throughout his career, Mendelssohn wrote in Hebrew, and his magnum opus in that regard was his translation of the Torah, of the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, into High German. Mendelssohn's translation was published in Hebrew letters.
The Neue Synagoge, the new synagogue, the Orianenbürgerstrasse synagogue in Berlin from the 1860s, the facade. Now that's an example both of the fact that Jews felt confident in their new place in German society, but also were confident enough that they were willing to articulate Jewish difference, that they built a beautiful, magnificent synagogue that can be seen on the cityscape in a Moorish style, a made-up Moorish style, as if to say, we are here and we are proud of the fact that we're somewhat different.
You have the medals that the war veteran won. So this could also be one of those examples. On first glance, it's simply a medal. You earn it you achieve it. It honors your achievement as an army soldier and not as a Jew. But the person who owns it and keeps it and takes it into emigration also tells us something about his Jewish identity.
First is, of course, the yellow badges, the stars of David, marking, showing that physical shard from the past, this piece of cloth which represents marking, distinguishing, identifying, and therefore separating, exclusion of Jews from the body politic and from society, is key to the Holocaust. The Sharit HaPlita volumes, in their very presence, the listing of the names, seeing the listing of the names, that very presence also deals with absence, with loss.
Certainly Fritz Bauer's judicial robes mark another moment of a kind of very complex shared history that you have, in this case, a German Jew who had emigrated. I don't like to use the term exile. Bauer, who does return to Germany and plays an extremely important role in the city of Frankfurt, a major moment in Germany's long and halting and reluctant, but ultimately rather profound confrontation with its past.
What the LBI does, and I think does very well, is translate this experience into the digital realm. That would be a challenge, at least for the digital realm, that artifacts themselves aren't, you can't do without artifacts. Also, it really is just a question of the depth of the experience. So artifacts give you a completely different learning experience and can enhance your learning experience, and the physical senses that we have as human beings are also ingrained into this whole learning process. So I'd say as much as the translation of these experiences can be undertaken into the digital realm, the physical objects themselves are, of course, irreplaceable. And that's what makes the archive, for example, so important.
Both the Shared History project and the core exhibition of the Jewish Museum Berlin focus on the relationships between Jews and non-Jews, primarily Christians, throughout the ages and view it as a constantly changing dynamic process and not one between two static blocks. The core exhibition of the Jewish Museum Berlin views inclusion and exclusion as the two poles between which the course of Jewish history is to be understood. The criteria and conditions for belonging and exclusion are renegotiated and determined within both the Jewish community and by the surrounding society. The understanding and perception of Jewish history will, we hope, also be communicated through the Shared History project.
Well, the LBI has shown us, it's shown us a lot of things, of course, but it's also shown us that the connection, the historic connection between current generations of Jews living in Germany with past generations of Jews living in Germany is necessary for us to understand the situation we're in the present and to also develop ideas for the future.
The Shared History Project consists of several pieces that will combine to tell the story of Jews in German-speaking lands. The centerpiece is a website that will present an object each week during 2021. Revealed in chronological order, each object will be accompanied by an historical essay, a personal story, and related materials. The website will also maintain a virtual exhibition that will allow the user to visit the objects in a simulated museum environment. Shared History will also include conferences in 2020 and 2021.
One sees in the history of Jews in Germany a kind of cycle of migration, inclusion, exclusion, success, achievement, persecution, resilience, redemption. And this experience expressed in the lives of individuals is so important in order to understand first what was nearly destroyed by the Holocaust, but also what made life in Germany so rich and varied for the Jews who lived it.
By now, you all know that we've devised a plan for a more intimate dialogue in salons. And I want to thank all of the leaders from the salons who brought their expertise to this part of the program. They're going to give presentations, and then I hope that everyone in the room will feel free to engage in conversation with them. Through the magic of Zoom, you will now be transported to your assigned salon. If for some reason you don't end up in a salon, stay online and someone will redirect you. Thank you, and we'll see you back here around 6:05.
Well, I've just come back from a very stimulating session, salon session with Dr. Ruth. And I'm very, very pleased and grateful that so many people lent their time to helping us provide this feast for thought. Last March, I took my place as the latest in a succession of presidents of LBI who have led that important institution since its founding in 1955. I've had the pleasure and privilege of knowing three of them, Ismar Schorsch, Bernard Blum, and Ronald Sobel. You can't imagine both the pride and pressure I feel simply being associated with these remarkable men. Having once sat at their feet, I now stand on their shoulders as they take on the weighty responsibility of not only leading a storied institution, but also following in their footsteps. Earlier in the year, with my urging, although it took no urging at all, the board of LBI voted to confer on Ronald Sobel the Leo Baeck Medal, the Institute's most prestigious honor. Traditionally, the conferring of the Leo Baeck Medal is the main event of our annual dinner, and if not for the pandemic, we would be presenting it at this moment to Rabbi Sobel. We decided, however, that bestowing an honor of this importance and weight should be done in person, and with Ronald's agreement, we have decided to postpone the medal presentation to a post-COVID time, which we fervently hope will be within the next year. We could not, however, postpone our responsibility or our desire to recognize Ronald Sobel's nearly 3 decades of service to LBI, which include his 8 years as president. After considering the best way to recognize this service, we decided to establish the Dr. Ronald B. Sobel Collections Preservation Fund at LBI. This fund will provide support for crucial activities at the heart of LBI's mission: the gathering, preservation, and accessibility of the documents, books, artwork, and ephemera that make up the legacy and represent the history of German-speaking Jewry. There is no better way, in my judgment, to recognize Ronald Sobel's long and distinguished service to LBI than to associate forever his name with the activity that defines our institution. Without Ronald's knowledge, we have been engaged in the past few months in recruiting founding donors for the Sobel Fund during a so-called silent phase, before announcing the creation of the fund to the public. Now, tonight, we publicly announce the existence of the fund and will soon reveal how successful our early efforts have been. But before doing that, I would like to introduce Joshua Davidson, Senior Rabbi at Temple Emmanuel in New York City, who sends his greetings to Rabbi Sobel.
Dear friends, I'm so grateful and honored to have the opportunity to represent Temple Emmanuel on the occasion of the establishment of the Dr. Ronald B. Sobel Collections Preservation Fund. Rabbi Sobel has been a leader in so many institutions during his distinguished career, but clearly his nearly 60 years at Emmanuel stand out for his influence on our congregation, on New York City, and on American Jewry. And his commitment to the Leo Baeck Institute represents a powerful example of his service to the community. During his 30 years on the LBI Board, including 8 years as its president, Dr. Sobel has helped guide the Institute as it transformed from an archive on East 73rd Street to a modern-day digitized wealth of historical resources at the Center for Jewish History. There are several important links between Emmanuel and LBI. First, of course, is the fact that Congregation Emmanuel was founded in 1845 on the Lower East Side by 33 Jews, most of whom were German-speaking immigrants. As the congregation moved north and eventually built its home on Fifth Avenue 90 years ago, there's always remained significant participation and leadership from the descendants of those German and Austrian Jews. And no one has documented that more thoroughly than Rabbi Sobel in his doctoral dissertation. Now, as our senior rabbi emeritus and president emeritus of the Leo Baeck Institute, Dr. Sobel is as active as ever. His deep interest in LBI's collections and abiding conviction that they must be preserved and accessible to scholars and the public inspired the Institute to establish the Dr. Ronald B. Sobel Collections Preservation Fund. It is a fitting, perhaps the most fitting way to recognize his service to the Leo Baeck Institute and at the same time to provide a crucial service to the public. You'll be hearing more about the Sobel Fund tonight, and I want to thank those members of Emmanuel who are among its founding donors. Ronnie, for your inspirational leadership and all that you have accomplished, and even more for your nurturing friendship towards me, I am personally so grateful. I congratulate you, Joni, and your entire family on the establishment of this new fund that will allow LBI to continue its vital work to preserve our sacred history long into the future. Much love to you.
Thank you, Josh. And now it is a pleasure to introduce a great personal friend and a great friend to LBI, David Gill, the Consul General of Germany in New York.
Thank you, David. And meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde des Leo Baeck Instituts. As the son of a Protestant minister, I had the privilege in my childhood to meet many impressive clergymen and women. This privilege extended into continued luck after my childhood was over and I had moved out of my parents' home. Time and again, I was able to benefit from my interactions with insightful religious leaders. When I came to New York as Consul General 3 years ago, I was gifted once again when I got to know a clergyman whose rabbinical talents are legendary, as are his knowledge and kindness, intellect and spirituality, gratitude and wisdom. You all know that I'm talking, of course, about Rabbi Ronald Sobel. More than 30 years ago, another clergyman crossed my way, and we walked many miles together, metaphorically and literally. A Lutheran minister from Rostock, a Baltic harbor city in East Germany, he had resisted the communist regime and had supported many others to do the same. He was a leader of the peaceful revolution in his home city and became a parliamentarian during the political transition in East Germany, where I first had the honor to work with him. His name was Joachim Gauck, a name that would soon become synonymous in Germany for the importance of facing the past in the name of true freedom. No longer a clergyman, he became the first federal commissioner for the Stasi files. As the federal commissioner, he shaped the way Germany dealt with the legacy of the secret police in the East. It was his vision that put the interests of the victims first and advocate for opening the files immediately to the public so that society could begin to cope with the past, politically, historically, legally, and of course, personally. He pushed for an intense debate about personal responsibilities, about the abuse of power, the suppression of dissenters, about resistance and resilience, about truth and lies, guilt and reconciliation.
Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, lieber David Marwell, lieber Billy Weitzer, vor allen Dingen Sie, lieber Dr. Sobel, dear Ronald, einen Wert kann nur ein Dasein besitzen, das nicht genug daran hat, da zu sein. Leo Baeck war es, der mit diesen Worten einen wahrhaft hohen Anspruch beschreibt. Es ist der Anspruch an ein Leben, welches das Gute nicht nur predigt, sondern es auch tut. Es war der Anspruch, den Leo Baeck an sein eigenes Leben stellte. Und es war seine Zuschreibung auf das Wesen des Judentums, so der Titel seines wahrscheinlich bekanntesten Werkes, aus dem dieses Zitat stammt. Ich habe das Glück, dieses Buch als Originalausgabe zu besitzen. Zum Geschenk machte es mir ein besonderer Mann. Ein Mensch, der sowohl den hohen Anspruch als auch einen damit untrennbar verbundenen, lebensbejahenden Optimismus verkörpert, wie kaum ein anderer. Rabbi Dr. Ronald S. Sobel. Er schenkte mir das Buch bei unserer ersten Begegnung. Ich erinnere mich noch gut daran. Es war im Herzen Berlins, am Pariser Platz, und ich hatte die große Freude und Ehre, die Leo Baeck-Medaille verliehen zu bekommen und saß bei dem feierlichen Essen zusammen mit Dr. Sobel an einem Tisch und wir kamen in ein sehr intensives Gespräch. Es begegneten sich zwei Menschen mit gänzlich unterschiedlichen Lebenserfahrungen, aber dennoch begegneten sich Menschen, die ganz ähnliche Erkenntnisse in ihrem Leben gefunden hatten. Ich darf sagen, ich habe diese Begegnung und diesen Austausch sehr genossen und denke bis heute daran. Nicht nur aus diesem Grund ist es mir eine große Freude, heute Rabbi Sobel für seine großen Verdienste um das Leo Baeck Institut zu würdigen und ihm von Herzen dafür zu danken. In seinen 8 Jahren als Präsident hat Rabbi Sobel sein ganzes Dasein in diese Aufgabe hineingegeben, als weitsichtiger und einflussreicher Leiter des Instituts. Mit seiner rabbinischen Weisheit, seiner Erfahrung, seiner Energie und seinem Engagement hat er gewaltige Herausforderungen gemeistert, dem LBI neue Möglichkeiten eröffnet und viele Freunde des Instituts zu loyaler und tatkräftiger Unterstützung inspiriert. Das Leo Baeck-Institut ist dank seiner Leidenschaft gut aufgestellt, effizient ist es sichtbar und hörbar. Ich bin dankbar für das Vertrauen, das nach den Schrecken des Holocaust zwischen Juden und Deutschen wieder gewachsen ist. Dank der Bereitschaft so vieler Menschen auf der ganzen Welt, den Deutschen die Hand zur Versöhnung zu reichen. Das Leo Baeck-Institut hat Zeit seiner Existenz einen immensen Beitrag dazu geleistet, indem es die gewaltige Erinnerung an das deutschsprachige Judentum aufbewahrt hat, zugänglich gemacht hat und im Hier und Heute verankert hat und auch, dass es die Verbindung nach Deutschland so intensiv pflegte und pflegt. Zu einem Deutschland, das sich wieder neu über ein wachsendes jüdisches Leben freuen kann, in dem wieder Synagogen neu errichtet und Rabbiner ordiniert werden, wo Kinder aus der Tora lernen. Ich bin froh, in einem Land zu leben und Präsident gewesen zu sein, das sich darüber freut, dass Juden in diesem Land Platz haben. Und ich bin mir bewusst, dass wir auch in dieser Zeit intensiv gegen die Seuche des Antisemitismus angehen müssen. Wir werden das tun. Auch aus diesem Grund ist die Arbeit des Leo Baeck-Instituts so wichtig. Es verbindet doch die Geschichte mit der Gegenwart. Die 1700-jährige Geschichte des deutschsprachigen Judentums kann uns viel über Migration, über Menschenrechte, Assimilation, über Vorurteile, aber auch über Resilienz und andere wichtige Fragen im Kleinen wie im Großen in unserer zunehmend globalen Welt lehren. Rabbi Sobel und den engagierten Mitarbeitern am Leo Baeck-Institut möchte ich heute von Herzen Danke sagen und sie beglückwünschen zu ihrer einzigartigen Sammlung von Zeugnissen des deutschsprachigen Judentums, zu ihrem überzeugenden internationalen Programm und dafür, dass sie bewahren, was einst im Holocaust gänzlich zerstört werden sollte. Danke, lieber Ronald Sobel, dass Sie in Ihrem Leben nie einfach nur da sein wollten, sondern, um es wieder mit den Worten von Leo Baeck zu sagen, Ihre Religion nicht nur erlebt, sondern gelebt haben und damit für andere ein leuchtendes Beispiel geworden sind. Danke.
Dear friends of the Leo Baeck Institute, may I first join President David Marwell and Executive Director William Weitzer in thanking those whose generosity made possible the salons of intellectual diversity in which we participated this past hour. At the same time, I join in expressing my gratitude to the galaxy of academic, artistic, and diplomatic brilliance who shared with us of their wisdom and insights. To all of you and to each of them, we express our heartfelt appreciation. The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, was the singular personality in American history who Rabbi Dr. Leo Baeck, for whom our institute is named, admired most. As early as the First World War, more than 100 years ago, Rabbi Baeck was rehearsing to memory the language of the Gettysburg Address. At the time, he was serving as a chaplain in the German army on the Eastern Front, trying to make sense of the madness and carnage that was all around him. 2.5 decades later, in the early 1940s, before his own deportation to the Theresienstadt concentration camp, when the Jewish community in Germany was already overwhelmingly decimated, Rabbi Baeck again turned his attention to Lincoln, attempting to fathom, if even inadequately, what had happened to his beloved Germany, the Germany of Bach and Beethoven, Schumann and Brahms, Kant and Hegel, Heine and Schiller, and how might the great political leadership of the world start to bring healing to the bodies and souls and nations that had physical, emotional, and spiritual wounds unprecedented in the entirety of human history. In February 1947, having miraculously survived the concentration camp, Rabbi Baeck, during his first visit to the United States, was welcomed to the White House by then President Harry Truman. The next day, he received an invitation from the House of Representatives to offer an opening prayer. The date for that prayer was to be February 12th, fortuitously the anniversary when we Americans celebrate the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. In that prayer, Rabbi Baeck reminded the Congress that Lincoln himself had told that same body of legislators during the Civil War that we cannot escape history. Rabbi Baeck concluded his prayer with these words: "So help us, O God, that we may not evade history." Dear friends, at the very essence of the Leo Baeck Institute, in its deepest heart and soul, lives the moral imperative never to evade history. That is our promise to the world, and of course to you who support the great work of the Institute. We will never evade history. It is our pledge to the past, our commitment to the present, and our dedication to the future. Never evade history.